Hayao Miyazaki is one of the most renowned and prolific animators of our time. He's made seminal works like Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, and Ponyo. And most people know him as a director, but it just so happens that he actually wrote a manga as well. And the manga in question is Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. Now you're probably saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, I saw the movie, isn't that what you're talking about? Well, yes, but there was a manga that came out prior to this. But not only that, if you saw the movie of Nausicaa, you only saw about 20% of the story of the manga. 80% of the story was left untold. And not only that, but the manga takes on a different tenor than the movie. The movie was more so made for families. It was supposed to be nicer, have a better tone, and have a happy ending. But the manga is anything but. There's blood, there's death, there's heartache, and there's a lot of hard philosophical questions being asked. That's why when I tell people it's one of my favorite manga of all time, they always give me a weird look like, what do you mean it's one of your favorites? Because if you go based on the movie, it seems antithetical to everything that I enjoy. You know, the stuff like Berserk, Gantz, Vagabond. But I'm here to tell you that Nausicaa the manga is just truly exceptional, guys. And if you read it for yourself or watch this video, you're gonna understand really how exceptional it is. Now, I will say this from the outset, I love the movie. In fact, I love all of Miyazaki's movies. They're all such wonderful experiences that really immerse you into the world that's being created. But the manga really takes it to the next level for me, and without further ado, let's get into that story and talk about Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Once flourishing societies disappeared into the darkness, and the land was taken over by a forest of colossal toxic bacteria, a sea of corruption. Mankind fled to the periphery, forming kingdoms scattered across the bits of land that remained. Protected by the ocean waves, barely escaping pollution from the sea, lay a small kingdom of just 500, known as the Valley of the Wind. A girl named Nausicaa makes her way into the sea of corruption, noticing the marks of Ohm teeth. She then finds an Ohm shell that was shed this morning. She uses an eye shield as a gunship canopy, as the bread fungus starts scattering its spores. Now, if humans walked into the forest for just 5 minutes without protection, they would die from lung decay. She then hears a voice crying out, "He killed us." She notices an Ohm attacking someone as she fires a shot to get their attention. She then boards her aircraft and instructs the individual to go upwind. Though the Ohm left the forest, he's still chasing them with blind rage. Something that shouldn't happen. After failing to calm it down, she uses some strobe grenades. After successfully redirecting the Ohm, she apologizes for using strobe grenades. She then meets up with the individual, and it's someone that she recognizes, Master Yupa. She then tames a wild squirrel fox, and asks to keep it, to which Yupa agrees. Now it seems that war is at hand, and Nausicaa will be taking her father's place in the conflict. The village then holds a celebration for Yupa, as Nausicaa's father says that they had 11 children, but only one of them was raised to adulthood. While flying with her uncle Mito, she hears the same angry voice saying, "We will kill them." She makes her way to the Sea of Corruption, noticing a freighter being attacked by some insects. Though she tries her best to get them off, the grubs chew through the wings, causing the ship to crash. Nausicaa then helps out a girl named Rastel. She's the daughter of the chieftain of Pajite. Rastel then asks Nausicaa to give something to her older brother. Now it turns out that Pajite was attacked by the Imperial Guard of the Vai Emperor, and the kingdom that they hail from is Tauromachia. Now this makes no sense because the two are supposed to be allies. The Ohm from yesterday returns as Nausicaa discerns that he means no harm. The Tauromachian army then searches vigorously for the object that Rastel had. Nausicaa heads back to the Valley of the Wind, and she tells her father what happened to Pajite. A Tauromachian armored corvette then invades the land, and carelessly lands in a newly seeded field, destroying all the crops. Nausicaa then notices worm handlers being deployed, and they're basically outcasts that have been banned from all other societies. But it looks like the Tauromachian army is using them for their own purposes. The worm handlers release their slugs upon Nausicaa, but they have no effect on her. She then engages in a duel with one of the Tauromachian soldiers, but Yupa intervenes, saying that this will just result in a meaningless war. The commander agrees to withdraw, but warns Nausicaa that they will meet again one day. Afterwards, Master Yupa wagers that was Kushana, the fourth daughter of the Vai Emperor. Elsewhere, Nausicaa and the others are forced to burn down the oldest tree in the valley, and it's because it's infested with the bread fungus. On this day, the Tauromachian army declared war on the Dorok principalities, and it's in this moment that Nausicaa wonders why she was born a princess. A man named Kurotoa is assigned to Princess Kushana. As of yesterday, 7 of the Dorok principalities have already surrendered. Forces are diverted away from Kushana, as it's suspected that her brothers think that she's deliberately hiding the stone. Goa, leader of the worm handlers, takes Kurotoa to an area where a god warrior is located. Looks like Pajite is taking control of the stone to prevent any further destruction. Now it's one of the monsters that burnt down the world in 7 days. Now upon seeing this, Kurotoa dreams of the day that he can harness such power. The rendezvous for Nausicaa's men is 100 meters south of Pajite, which means that they're going to be crossing the Sea of Corruption. The various youngsters in the village bring Nausicaa some nuts, and wish her well on her travels. Mito's hand has been invaded by forest poison, meaning it will turn to stone in just 1 year's time. Master Yupa goes to Nausicaa, finding out that the so-called dangerous plants from the Sea of Corruption are not so dangerous after all. If you give them clean water and air, they're actually pretty benign. Not long afterwards, Nausicaa and her men take flight to do battle. They join up with the other armies of the periphery, as they are all shocked that Nausicaa is piloting a gunship, especially given the fact that she's a girl. Nausicaa's father receives word that the Sea of Corruption is destroying many kingdoms, and many children are dying before they reach adulthood. However, within the center of the Sea of Corruption is a world of peace and tranquility. It is thusly hypothesized that the Sea of Corruption is meant to cleanse the world. Rastel's brother then intervenes, attacking the Tormikian airships at will. Transport Ship 2 starts going down, so Kurotoa looks to take over. As the airship crashes, Nausicaa notices children jumping out to avoid the flames. A vision of Nausicaa then tells the brother of Rastel to stop the killing. The boy then gets hit, as the Tormikian army goes on their way. Nausicaa then lands within the Sea of Corruption, surprised by how clear the water looks. Unfortunately, they landed in an Ohm nest, so Nausicaa attempts to calm them down with her unique gifts. It seems to work, but without warning, the entire force gets stirred up, forcing her to find the source of the disturbance. Now it turns out that Rastel's brother was the source of the commotion. Nausicaa goes to save him, imploring him not to use his gun. She says killing is not the answer. Besides, there's thousands at this point, so aggression will not work. The two get thrown from the aircraft, as Nausicaa's mask comes off in the process. The Ohm saves Nausicaa, and tells Rastel's brother to depart the forest. Afterwards, Rastel's brother thinks it's a miracle that there's no miasma down here. Now Nausicaa has a dream of protecting an Ohm when she was younger, but her village quickly eradicated it. After waking up, she learns that Aspel was Rastel's twin brother. While Aspel works on her engine, Teto finds Nausicaa find her pouch. She tells Aspel that the forest was created to cleanse the world, but she wonders if humans are the real pollution. After Aspel fixes the glider, the two share a mask and make their way out of the forest. While attempting to leave the Sea of Corruption, Nausicaa spots the wreckage of a Tormikian ship. They then start getting chased by a Dorok warship. The Dorokian soldiers apprehend Nausicaa, as Aspel quickly fights back. The priest then steps forward, asking them to be their guest as they cautiously enter the warship. Mito goes to speak with Kushana. Now, if he wants permission to search for Nausicaa, he needs to tell her where the stone is. Mito asserts to knowing nothing, as she still grants him permission to search her out. Nausicaa then finds out that the Dorok army is set on attacking the Tormikian army, which means they're also attacking soldiers from the Valley of the Wind. Nausicaa is perturbed by this notion, wondering what war can accomplish. Aspel determines that after they crush Kushana, they'll move north to colonize more lands, which is why they brought their own women and children. Now the battle rages on, as Nausicaa notices Mito's airplane in the sky. She then takes the priest captive and demands that they cease fire. The Dorok army heeds her words, thusly raising their white flag. Nausicaa then makes her departure from the ship. But now that she's gone, the Dorok army is just going to continue on with their plans nonetheless. Nausicaa then reconvenes with her comrades, as they finally get a move on. She then senses an overwhelming hatred, noticing hundreds of angry Ohm going towards the Tormikian encampment. Now it turns out that the Dorok are using a baby Ohm to lure the others. Meanwhile, the Dorok use kamikaze tactics against the Tormikian army. Kushana smells something suspicious about this, suspecting that they're laying a larger trap. Nausicaa manages to shoot the rope holding the baby Ohm, sending it tumbling to the ground. Upon inspection, Nausicaa is horrified that they purposefully kept the baby alive to lure out the other Ohm. Mito returns to the camp, warning them that a horde of Ohm are heading their way. Now with Ohm coming from every direction, the Tormikian army frantically looks to evacuate the area. Kurotoa rescues Kushana, but it looks like he might be using her for his own devices. Having seen what became of her men, Kushana cuts off the back of her hair as a tribute. Now, though the baby is in tremendous pain, Nausicaa still can't put it out of its misery. She still thinks that killing is wrong. The baby Ohm then goes into the lake, saying, "Let's go home, to the forest, the forest, to the forest." Nausicaa begs for the other Ohm not to go into the forest. She then flawlessly flies her glider into the Tormikian corvette, ready to discuss something with Kushana. The two come to terms, as Nausicaa reads the wind so that she can land safely. The Tormekians help the baby Ohm per Nausicaa's request. The nearby Ohm use their antennas to lift Nausicaa into the air. Particles of light fill the area, as the Ohm heal Nausicaa's burn wound. The Dorok priest realizes that Nausicaa is part of the prophecy. Now without explanation, the Ohm tell Nausicaa to return to the north. Mito returns to the village to inform them that Nausicaa is heading to the south, and she's doing so across the Rotwood with the remnants of the Tormekian army. In a flashback, Nausicaa tells Mito that capturing an Ohm was thought to be impossible, so that means that something terrible is going to happen in the south where the Dorok are. An oracle speaks of an event called Daikaisho, the Great Wave of the Sea. The last one occurred 300 years ago, where a dispute for the succession of the throne spread across the country. In addition to this, the Ohm were slaughtered in massive numbers by the worm handlers. The enraged Ohm devastated the land, until finally their corpses spread even more spores, leading to a new sea of corruption. The king tells Mito to search for Yupa, as Nausicaa will need her aid. The king wonders if Nausicaa aims to protect the whole world by herself, as he then finally draws his last breath. Nausicaa then says her farewells to her comrades, as Mito heads off to alert Master Yupa. Meanwhile, Yupa goes to a mining town, looking for a ship to go to the Rotwood. Some worm handlers get kicked out of town, so Yupa brings them some wine and asks for their ship. They, however, decide to shoo him away, but he catches a ride on their vehicle regardless. Inside, he notices weird containers with bits of eggshell. Upon landing, he notices that they're using subterranean gases to purify the air. He then listens in on a conversation between the worm handlers and the Dorok. They mention raising something, as Yupa then gets discovered in the air ducts, leading to a full-scale search. While escaping, he arrives in a room with a budding Ohm in a stasis tube. Aspel comes forward to do battle with him. Upon clashing with each other, Aspel vows to help out Yupa. They break the tubes, creating a diversion so that they can run away. A battleship from the Council of Monks then arrives, instructing everyone to surrender. Mirlupa, the younger brother of the Holy Emperor, uses his psychic abilities on the Dorok priest to elucidate the truth. The priest says that by resurrecting the demon arts, he's bringing about Daikaisho. He tells Mirlupa about the angel that speaks with insects, the one who flies like a bird in the sky, but he refuses to speak her name, and by doing so, he's willingly accepting death. Nausicaa feels the priest's presence fading away, as a visage of Mirlupa arrives, imploring her to become one with him. As a final act before departing, the priest prevents this from happening, saving Nausicaa in the process. Yupa and Aspel then make their escape, as Mirlupa vows to capture Nausicaa with his next opportunity. Ketcha, an acolyte of the Holy One, believes that Nausicaa tricked the priest into defying Mirlupa. We then find out that Mirlupa is the real leader of the Doroks, the one who controls everything from behind the throne. According to legends, before the 7 days of fire, they had the skills to control the wellsprings of life, and to bring about all sorts of new species. Yupa believes that Mirlupa has revived the knowledge to turn the war in his favor. Aspel then recalls a story about a god warrior that was able to regenerate its body and even grow a heart with a special stone. This was the reason that the Vite Emperor attacked their land, to retrieve the stone so that he could take control of the god warriors. Their ship then comes under attack, as they dip below the clouds in a massive storm. Meanwhile, the Tormekian army is over the Dorak Principality of Zapata. Kushana then pulls a gun on Kurotoa, suspecting that this whole operation was a trap set up by her older brothers to get rid of her. Now Kurotoa wants to switch sides and start working with Kushana. He also admits that it was her illustrious father who gave the order to kill her. With this, Kushana aims to rip the throne from her father's hands no matter what. Nausicaa smells burning flesh, as two bombers then come into view. While the fighting intensifies, Nausicaa vacates the ship on her glider, and she's doing this to inspect a village that was attacked by the bombers. Surprisingly, everyone in the village was long dead before the bombers striked. It seems as though the miasma did this, which should be impossible since they're hundreds of leagues away from the forest. The residents took refuge in a temple, but because they sealed it off from the miasma, they eventually suffocated due to the lack of oxygen. Luckily, two little children survived, as she takes them out of the temple. Some shooting comes from a well, as Nausicaa heads over there expeditiously to see what's going on. A gigantic bug is attacking the Tormekian men, as Nausicaa tells them to plug their ears. Elsewhere, Yupa, Aspel, and Ketcha have landed in the land of the Forest People. Yupa says that the Forest People are the ancestors of the Worm Handlers, and have abandoned fire and shunned human civilization. A forest dweller offers them an insect egg, and tells Yupa to rest up from his injuries. We are then transported to the city fortress of the Dorok Principality of Zapata, where Kushana's brother is struggling to make any headway. Mirlupa returns and enters a tank, saying that the one clad in blue will cause confusion amongst the ranks. Mirlupa begins to suffer within the tank. Apparently, he was exposed to the air for too long. Kushana's ship then goes down, but she walks out unharmed. Nausicaa carries one of the wounded men away as the situation gets increasingly chaotic. The Dorok continue their barrage of attacks, attempting to take out Nausicaa at all cost. The general then accuses Kushana of being a traitor, and orders his men to arrest her. But thanks to Kurotoa, Kushana seizes the advantage, and takes control over the Toramikian forces. Nausicaa then finds herself in a tomb of sorts, as the dark specter from before searches her out. That being said, the specter is a sad, pathetic creature that quickly dissolves into the void. Upon waking up, she finds out that the two children were given away, since the army couldn't take them with them anymore. Nausicaa then discovers that the Toramikians are going to war to gain more people, since their population is rapidly falling. Nausicaa can't support the Toramikians taking the Doroks as slaves, but Kushana has no plans of heeding her words. That being said, she sees an opportunity. She decides to release the 2,000 prisoners and asks Nausicaa to ride with her into battle. Mirlupa senses the presence of Nausicaa, begging to be released from his stasis tube as the bombardment begins. If Mirlupa strains himself too hard, his body will disintegrate, so his vassals tell him to calm his spirit. The Toramikians use smoke and speed to their advantage, as the Doroks are doing their best to defend themselves. Toramikian cavalry bursts through, as the Doroks are surprised that they got through the trenches. In an attempt to turn the tide, the Doroks release their own cavalry at the Toramikians. Kushana's strategies overwhelm the Dorok, as one of the soldiers wonders why Nausicaa is riding with the White Witch of the Toramikian army. Nausicaa then fires a siren shell at one of the horse-like creatures, and it's to break the Dorok army advance. Not wanting anyone else to die, Nausicaa announces there's been enough bloodshed. Kushana is rather impressed, deciding to pull out and move forward. Some of Kushana's men then request permission to ride in support of Nausicaa, to which Kushana agrees. The Dorok then focus their efforts on taking down Nausicaa, as Kushana's men then come in to provide assistance. The Toramikians use themselves as a shield, but it's not long before she's completely surrounded by the Dorokian army. While protecting herself, she accidentally cuts one of the soldiers across the chest, making her feel quite guilty. The Dorok shoot her Horseclaw down, but instead of fleeing, she begs to treat the Horseclaw's wounds before he dies. An Imperial guard smacks her down, but it's not long before the Horseclaw retaliates. This, however, was the last of the Horseclaw's strength, as Nausicaa cries over his lifeless body. Word then comes in that the Toramikians are releasing the Dorok prisoners. Chiruka, commander of the Dorokian army, discovers that Nausicaa was the one that released the prisoners. A woman then comes forward with the two children that Nausicaa saved. Now it turns out that Nausicaa gave her some earrings in exchange for taking care of the two. Chiruka buys the earrings off of the woman and instructs her to travel to the lands of the east. He then confronts the Toramikians and commands them to surrender. However, the Toramikians find the notion laughable. Having saved the slaves, Nausicaa wants no further parts in the Toramikian invasion, deciding to fly away on her glider. Chiruka then goes off to investigate some spores that are being cryogenically frozen, and they're doing this for future military activities against the Toramikian army. When Chiruka meets with Mirlupa, he discovers that His Holiness wants to use the very forest itself against the Toramikians, hence the reason for the spores. He will thusly make them suffer in the way that he is suffering. We then see that the Dorok plan to use the spores to turn the Toramikian homeland into a sea of corruption. Elsewhere, Mito and his men meet up with a young girl, finding out that she's taking care of Master Yupa's Horseclaw. Yupa is then taken to the capital city of Eftal, a city that was swallowed up in the Sea of Corruption in the Daikaisho that happened 300 years ago. Only after all the poison has been swallowed up and eliminated will the forest finally perish. Now the one clad in blue will not save them. She will simply show them how to save themselves. Before the three depart, Yupa tells the guide that he very much wants him to meet Nausicaa one day. Back in the air, Mito's men notice a Dorok warship carrying one of the god warriors. Mito's crew starts attacking, as the Dorokian soldiers retreat to the clouds. The Doroks eventually fire back, knocking one of the valley planes out of the sky. Now the Doroks are rather nervous about the god warrior's movement, sensing a great danger that could soon be unleashed upon the whole world. Meanwhile, Yupa, Ketcha, and Aspel hear the gunfire from the ground, but are unsure as to what it is. Mito miraculously lands his plane without sustaining serious damage, and upon seeing Master Yupa, he's finally pleased that he found him. Mito then takes a moment to thank Ketcha for helping out the princess. At nighttime, Aspel suspects that Mirlupa has found a way to use the God Warrior without the controlling stone, which is a very terrifying notion. While heading to their base in Kubo, the Toramikians notice a gigantic dragon insect flying by their airship. In fact, a whole swarm then starts flying beneath them, as they all begin to wonder what exactly is going on here. A random ship that is not associated with the Toramikians then fires at one of the insects, causing the entire swarm to descend upon them. And noticing that the planes are a threat, they have their eyes on the Toramikians next. Realizing this, Kuratoa puts things into high gear in an attempt to outrun them. Kushana then wonders if this is the start of Daikaisho, as she then instructs her men to take up their battle stations. Gunners take out one of the insects with a barrage of shots through the head. The Toramikians on the ground then move with a sense of urgency, realizing that the situation with the insects is especially dire. Now, one of the Imperial family's armored corvettes rams into Kushana's aircraft, smashing it to pieces. And it just happens to be her own brother. Kushana calls him out for turning tail and running home when the war turns against him. But he cares not about her intellectual presumptions. The brother then ridicules Kushana's mother, calling her a feeble, disgusting creature. Kuratoa interjects, saying they need to flee for their lives before the gigantic insects arrive. The older brother looks to flee, but not before ending Kushana's life in the process. Kushana and Kuratoa manage to save themselves, but the latter is quite battered from the physical abuse. Kushana then lifts up Kuratoa and drags his injured body over to an aircraft to make their escape. Before they take flight, Kushana watches the insects destroy her brother's ship, in literally no time flat. Thus, aerial escape seems impossible at this moment. So, her along with some other men make their way over to a ditch. Kushana then thinks about how her mother was poisoned years ago. The poison drove her spirit mad, and for Kushana to survive the Viper's Nest, she needed to pretend as though nothing ever happened. In the now, Kushana seems to be at peace, as a gigantic insect bears down on her. She then hums a song to herself, as the insect decides to fly away without harming her. Elsewhere, Nausicaa finds a small marsh in the middle of the desert. She eventually comes across a small child, as he directs her to a tomb of monks. The boy refers to Nausicaa as an apostle of heaven. The Holy Emperor of the Doroks has stolen the teachings of God, and the sovereignty of the monks. The omens of apocalypse are now upon them, and soon the sea of corruption shall overflow, meaning that Daikaisho is near. The monk says that destruction is inevitable, but Nausicaa asserts that she loves life, and she won't give up, no matter what. Nausicaa then sees one of the injured insects crash into a nearby marsh, realizing that the entire area will soon be covered by miasma. She then urges the monk to flee, but it seems like he just recently passed away. That being said, he urges Nausicaa to go as her heart moves. Nausicaa then takes the small boy with her as the two make their escape. She instructs Chikuku to hold his breath, as there's something different about this miasma. As they make their way through the clouds, they notice a Dorok warship spreading the miasma. The insects start going mad because of it, as she then realizes that the miasma will trigger Daikaisho. The scientists on the Dorok ship get consumed by the mold, as Mirlupa can sense that Nausicaa is near. Mirlupa then uses his shadow form to approach Nausicaa, claiming he'll crush her heart with his hands. He then demands to see her fear, but she says he's a pitiful, tragic creature. His outward facade starts disintegrating, as Chikuku shoots a dart through his left eye. Now the Dorok want to get him back to his bath before he dies, but the mold starts taking over the entire ship. Now despite everything that has happened thus far, Nausicaa still helps out the Dorok people. The ship explodes as the part of the mold that survives turns into an umbrella. The various insects in the area attempt to eat the mold as Nausicaa's glider goes in for a rough landing. Chiruko's arm is broken from the landing, so Nausicaa decides to make him a splint to prevent any further damage. She then wants to find out what happened to the mold, but due to severe exhaustion, she ends up falling off of the glider. Now if Chiruka ends Nausicaa right here and now, she'll no longer be a hindrance to Mirlupa. However, Chikuku is not going to allow that to happen. The mold starts consuming the insect carcasses and proceeds to attack the Doroks. After finishing off the insects, it quickly starts looking for fresh prey. Chiruka decides to bring Nausicaa and Chikuku onto the Dorok ship, and even offers to return Nausicaa's earrings to her. In addition to this, he ordered the ship's mechanics to repair her glider. Now the all too apparent truth that Daikaisho is coming dawns upon Chiruka, but he refuses to believe in it. The mold continues spreading at an exponential rate, and the masks are doing nothing to stop the miasma. Nausicaa then senses something dangerous coming their way, as a gigantic mold-like arm attempts to grab them. Now it seems like the mold is displaying some form of intelligence. The mold in the container starts mutating, as Nausicaa attempts to throw it overboard before it's too late. She does exactly that, as it then gently glides down into the larger mold on the ground. We are now at Shua, the holy capital of the divine Dorok Emperor. Various doctors perform all sorts of medical procedures to preserve Mirlupa's body. The king then gazes upon a god warrior that is being grown via cloning techniques. However, they're missing the black box, something very crucial to controlling the god warrior. Now while in the tank, Mirlupa dreams of having a new body, but it's not long afterwards that his body begins to disintegrate. And as it turns out, this is exactly what happened to his father's body, which is why he's so against going into a new body. The king has added a drug to Mirlupa's tank, as we see some monstrous, genetically altered golems getting a bit out of hand. Now the king has endured many surgeries to keep himself youthful and healthy, while Mirlupa's body continues to wither away. Namulith, the divine emperor, orders the tomb to be sealed away, as he's now ready to etch his name into history. Mito then notices one of the Toramikian royal family corvettes, wondering what this could mean. Inside the town, Ketcha can't stand watching a man whip some slaves, so she provides him with a swift kick to the face. Master Yupa grabs her as they make their escape from the Toramikian army. Aspel fights off the soldiers for just long enough so that they can make their escape. Now the Toramikians set fire to any grain that they can't carry, dooming the regular populace. Upon getting to the Cabo lands, they notice that the Sea of Corruption has sprouted from the corpses of insects. Unfortunately, when they get to the main town, it's been entirely wiped out by the miasma. Now Kushana's men remain holed up in the wreckage of her brother's ship, as they then notice an airplane off in the distance. It then dawns upon them that that's a ship from the Valley of the Wind, and it's being chased by a Toramikian armored corvette. The Valley of the Wind gets the better of them, forcing the Toramikians to land in the water. Someone from the Valley of the Wind then goes to talk to Kushana, as Aspel attempts to run her through with his sword. This is stopped, and Kushana offers up her sword as a sign of peace. But Aspel, still a little bit angry, reserves the right to duel her in the future. On the ship, Yupa tells Kushana that although Daikaisho is devastating, it's the fight for the remaining land that will cause the most devastation. Elsewhere, we notice numerous bombs being released to stop the spread of the mold. Nausicaa notes that this will only increase the mold's will to live. Her body gets affected by the miasma, as it seems like the four gigantic molds are trying to merge with each other. Nausicaa eventually passes out from exhaustion, as Chiruka wonders what Mirlupa would think of this scene if he saw it with his own eyes. Nausicaa then has a dream about the monk at the temple, and he tells her that the world will be purified through Daikaisho. She then produces a brilliant light, as the monk begins to spew a black ooze from his body. She is then surrounded by Ohm, as she's quite pleased to see them once more. Refugees start gathering around a hill, as Nausicaa boards her glider. One of the refugees tells Chiruka that God gave them the guidance through a white-winged bird, obviously referring to Nausicaa's glider. Nausicaa makes her way deep inside the miasma, noticing an Ohm that's been consumed by the mold itself. She warns the Ohm that they cannot defeat the mutation, but it seems they are resolute in their decision. She then discovers something rather astounding. The insects are dying to form a seed bed around the Ohm, and the plants are growing incredibly fast, despite the surrounding miasma. She then puts it all together. The Sea of Corruption, insects, and mold are all family. The insects weren't attacking the mold, they were eating its suffering. And because they couldn't eat the mutant mold, they made themselves into a seed bed so that the mold would have a forest to welcome it. She then takes a seat on the ledge of a hill, waiting for the Ohm to come. Back in Sappada, Kushana and Yupa discover one of the Hydra of the Dorok King. Yupa, who has a knowledge of these unholy creatures, says they must destroy its core to prevent it from coming back to life again. Mito senses that something is amiss, as a horde of large insects start flying overhead. Ketcha worries about Master Yupa, as we see him fighting off several of the Hydra in a deadly combat. Kushana steps in to provide assistance, and even urges Yupa to flee so that he may live on. The Hydra grab onto Kushana, as things are looking pretty dire. To fight back, they use a plane to blast a hole through one of the bodies. Unfortunately, they don't die that easily. They take down one of the aircrafts, but when the Ohms start arriving on the scene, they decide to run away. Mito manages to take off, as it's revealed that the Ohm are not angry right now. Yupa boards the Dorok aircraft, meeting up with the Divine Emperor himself. Now the Ohm are proceeding into the mutant miasma, the very thing that triggered Daikaisho. The Divine Emperor acknowledges that the Dorok principalities have been destroyed. Yupa then urges him to use the ships to rescue any people who are still in the miasma. In a surprising twist, we find out that the Divine Emperor wants to marry Kushana. Inside the ship, Kushana wakes up and starts going on a rampage to make her escape. She then makes her way to the front of the ship. Now the Divine Emperor wants to save her men, but that's only because he wants to use them for his own purposes. Kushana teases out the details to this agreement, as Namulith proposes that they build their own Twilight Kingdom together. Elsewhere, Nausicaa takes flight once more to glide above the Ohm. She urges them to stop their mindless rampage, but they plow forward, knowing that there's no end to humanity's foolishness. The Holy One speaks through the skeleton, telling Nausicaa that the Ohm were created to clean the planet that humans have contaminated. He then reminds Nausicaa that even her hands and feet are covered by blood. She is just as foolish as everyone else. Nausicaa acknowledges that humans are the most repulsive creatures on the planet, as she goes down to inspect the Ohm. She realizes that Daikaisho isn't punishment for humans' foolishness, it's purification for the Earth. And with this, she wants to become one with the forest. After reaching the forest, she notices that the 4 gigantic molds have begun to merge. As the mold approaches, one of the Ohms swallows Nausicaa. While on the ship, Chikuku tells Chiruka that Nausicaa can no longer be sensed. The two decide to conduct an investigation, discovering that the mold has completely covered and killed all the Ohm. They then come across some worm handlers, noticing that they're attempting to loot Nausicaa's glider. The worm handlers plan to raise some babies that were left behind by the villagers. Now the worm handlers planned on dividing the new forest between their 11 tribes in a peaceful manner, as they go about their way. Chikuku speaks with one of them telepathically, as the woman agrees to look for Nausicaa. They board a protective ship as she explains that the spores have entered the vast sea of mold and started to sprout. Now it dawns upon Chiruka that the Ohm are divine, and it's the insects who are saving the planet from the destructive humans. Nausicaa is eventually found, encased in a substance protecting her from the mold. The sun shines down upon the land, making the plants grow at an incredible speed. Nausicaa is pulled out, as everything turns green in the blink of an eye. Chikuku and Chiruka inspect Nausicaa's still body, wondering why she's covered in a mysterious gel. Now it turns out that it's the serum of the Ohm, and it's the very thing that protected her from the miasma. Now the worm handlers view Nausicaa as a deity, and want the gel for themselves. Chiruka does not allow this, taking Nausicaa's glider with them as they make their escape. Elsewhere, Yupa discovers that Namulith's men control the Hydra through high-pitched sounds. He then breaks out of his chains and starts fighting off the various Hydra and guards. When he happens to look off of the side of the ship, he notices Nausicaa's glider amongst the clouds. Mirlupa's shadowy form then looks to exact revenge on Namulith, but the older brother mocks him for being weak. Mirlupa then catches a glimpse of Nausicaa, making his way over to her so that he can possess her. Namulith then orders his men to fire upon the refugee ships, as Chiruka wonders what has come over the Holy Emperor. While Namulith demands subservience, Nausicaa is taken to a hill to rest up. Now Chiruka wants to leave so that he can do whatever he can to prevent further madness, but Chikuku warns him that he'll die if he does so. Chikuku then uses telepathy on one of the horse claws to bring Kuratoa over to Nausicaa's location. Inside Nausicaa's dream, her body begins to feel heavy, as Mirlupa looks to take control of her. She hears Teto in the outside world, as she begins to fight off the monstrous black spirit. She then helps a withered man walk as she eventually reaches the Sea of Corruption. A boy named Selm stands in the forest without a mask, and says that he has a secret to share with her. Now the old decrepit man does not wish to go into the forest, but Nausicaa helps him out nonetheless. Selm then reveals that he is Mirlupa, and he was born from the darkness. Now because it's Nausicaa's dream, she acknowledges that this is her darkness, meaning that it's a part of her. They then catch a ride on an Ohm as she realizes that the flow of time is different here. The Ohm are rather pleased to see Nausicaa, showing their admiration and support. Even Mirlupa seems rather pleased with the Ohm's playful spirit. Selm then tells Nausicaa that she's not a ghost, and that she's still very much alive. She can return to the physical world at any time, if she so desires. They reach the end of the Sea of Corruption, and their eyes are greeted with grass, birds, and trees. It seems as though the world is coming back to life again. The Dorok Emperor then wanders off happily into the void, as Nausicaa says that she's happy for him. Nausicaa then wakes up from her long slumber, feeling as though she's been reborn. Now Selm wants Nausicaa to join him in the forest, and to live there from now on. But Nausicaa can't do that, and that's because she loves the people of the world too much. After Selm takes his leave, Nausicaa meets up with Mito and the others. We then go to Tolas, the royal capital of the Tormikian Empire. The Vi Emperor hears about the substantial losses in the battlefield, making him quite enraged. The Royal Highness decides he'll enter the battlefield himself, as the two sons are not too pleased about how they were treated. At the Valley of the Wind, a strong gust of wind is causing all sorts of devastation in the village. A girl named Teppa then takes a wind glider into the air. Insects start coming her way, knocking her glider off course. Despite the damage to the glider, she still manages to land safely without getting hurt. The old fortune tellers then fear with the new child of the wind, i.e. Teppa, that the old child of the wind, Nausicaa, will never return to the valley. Elsewhere, Nausicaa quickly puts the people's minds at ease, as they treat her like a goddess in human form. Now Nausicaa wants to set out and convince the Doroks not to invade the Toramikians, but Kuratoa believes that she is mad. While in the air, she speaks to Chiruka, telling him that they are coming his way. He warns her, however, that she mustn't come, as we then see that him and various Doroks are getting stoned to death. She says that Mirlupa has found peace in the afterlife, and that she'll come his way momentarily. Namulith tells Kushana that after the stoning, they'll have the war ceremony. It's going to be quite the affair, and they'll even have their wedding ceremony at the same time. As the stoning takes place, Nausicaa flies into the region like a speeding bullet. She lands next to Chiruka and releases him from his chains. Nausicaa then grabs onto Chikuku's hand so that she can speak to the Dorok people. Right then, above their heads, we then see the pupa of a god warrior, the last survivor of the giants who turned the world into ash in just 7 days. Nausicaa reveals Namulith's plan, stating that this would lead to hatred and an endless cycle of revenge. Chiruka then sees the land to which Mirlupa has gone. Namulith releases the Hydra upon them, as Nausicaa implores everyone to flee the area. Nausicaa boards her glider and instructs Mito to fire upon the ship to destroy the god warrior. Aspel leads the fight against the Hydra, while Ketcha throws a special stone towards Nausicaa. She notices that the stone is shining as she then lands upon Namulith's ship. So, the blue-clad one resorts to fire in the end too. Well, you can't destroy the god warrior with fire, woman, declares Namulith. The two begin trading blows. Namulith claims that the Hydra come from the darkness of the human soul. He also says that Mirlupa used to be idealistic, but over time, he began to resent the very people that he wanted to help. Nausicaa hears the voice of the Om as the god warrior begins to come to life. Things look incredibly dire for Nausicaa, but the tide turns with Master Yupa leaping into action. Surprisingly though, the god warrior picks up Nausicaa and refers to her as mother. The god warrior starts shooting powerful blasts out of its mouth, as Nausicaa attempts to calm it down. The special stone that controls the god warrior crumbles to pieces. Nevertheless, the god warrior is completely entranced with Nausicaa, believing that she's truly his mother. Namulith's wounds appear to be grave, as he claims that he's tired of living. Namulith implores Kushana to go to the Crypts of Shua to discover the answers that she's looking for. We then learn that Namulith's body is just like the Hydra's bodies. It's immortal, but he still feels pain. The god warrior prepares to shoot down Mito's aircraft, but Nausicaa stops him, saying that they are her friends. The god warrior wants to fight Nausicaa's enemies, so he starts shooting blasts erratically. Nausicaa tells Kushana and Yupa that she's gonna head to Shua, and there she'll seal the doors of the crypts. She then tells her child, the god warrior, to fly to the western lands. And just then, the gigantic beast sprouts wings and prepares to fly through the sky. Kushana tosses a cloak towards Nausicaa, and says that she'll head to Shua as well. The god warrior travels at an incredible speed, as the others attempt to keep up with it as best as they can. Nausicaa senses that there is something wrong with the god warrior, so she encourages him to land so that they can rest up. After a rough landing, the god warrior says that it can't move anymore and that it's afraid. Though Nausicaa is hoping for the child's death, it still protects her from the elements. Toramikian troops then instigate the god warrior, so the child goes on the defensive and starts killing them with laser beams. Nausicaa notices that he's enjoying himself, as she sternly tells him to stop. The god warrior then sulks from its mistake, while Nausicaa acknowledges that she doesn't have much longer to live, and that's due to the child's poisonous light. Now Nausicaa plans on using the child's power to seal the Crypts of Shua, as she then names him Oma. On their flight, Nausicaa suspects that the god warriors were not meant to be gods of death. In fact, they were supposed to be benevolent gods. Nausicaa then meets up with the Toramikian royals, informing them that the Holy Emperor is dead and that the Dorok Lands have been swallowed up by the Sea of Corruption. She says that their scouting party was killed by Oma's light, and that they should avoid the Crypts of Shua. Now the brothers and their people are weary from constant warring, and they want to give Nausicaa a safe refuge so that she can rest up. Unfortunately, she collapses from exhaustion, causing Oma to go into a frenzy. After one of the brothers explains that the light is hurting Nausicaa, Oma decides to back off for the time being. Now as they all make their way to Shua, Oma suspects that the brothers are using Nausicaa as a hostage, and they're doing this to prevent him from attacking, but he's going to allow them to think that they have the upper hand for the time being. Now Nausicaa wonders who Oma is, and to her surprise, he answers her. I am Oma, arbitrator and warrior, and judge. He who metes out justice. Elsewhere, worm handlers meet up with Mito's crew, begging to go on their plane so they can meet up with Nausicaa again. The worm handlers abandon their possessions, something that they never do, so that they can travel with Mito and his crew to protect Nausicaa. Aspel realizes that Nausicaa is the thread that is holding everything together. Without her, the people would quarrel and splinter. Because of Daikaisho, 2/3 of the Dorok Lands have been engulfed by the Sea of Corruption, and the lower layer of the atmosphere is pervaded by a dense miasma. The Dorok people believe that Nausicaa is the white-winged apostle that shall lead them to paradise. In another way of thinking about it, the blue-clad one is not a savior, but a god of death. Chiruka then learns that Kushana is proposing a truce between the Tormekians and the Doroks, and she is accompanied by Nausicaa's mentor, Master Yupa. Despite this, there are still Doroks who hold much resentment towards the Tormekians, as they are planning a surprise attack. Kushana is aware of the attack, yet she seems unbothered by this. Even if they succeed in killing her, neither side will win. They'll merely turn the spot into an ocean of blood. Master Yupa attempts to quell things down by stopping a hand grenade by sacrificing his own arm. Elsewhere, Nausicaa wakes up in a panic, discovering that Teto has passed away. Despite losing his arm, Yupa still urges the Doroks to think things through rationally. He then goes to implore Kuritawa not to make the first move, since the danger on the ship has now passed. Some Doroks lying in wait conduct an ambush on Kushana, but Yupa uses his body as a shield to prevent any further conflict. Now Nausicaa senses that his life force is passing away, as he then says, "Ever forward, my darling wind." Despite Kushana's bloodied past, Yupa reminds her that this is the path of righteous rule that befits her. Nausicaa now wants Oma to take her out of the ship so that she can bury Teto. Of course, to accomplish this, he literally has to rip a section of the ship off. He then grabs the 2 Tormekian princes and instructs the other troops to return to their homeland. Oma uses fire to send the Tormekians away. He then proceeds to lie to Nausicaa about what happened. After landing in a small village with a tree, Nausicaa disembarks and proceeds to bury Teto. Goodbye. Forgive me for leaving you here this way. A man from the village comes upon the scene, as the god warrior collapses to the ground from exhaustion. Now the man will take care of Nausicaa, while Oma rests up on his own. As the man carries her away, Nausicaa notices that he has the same smell as her mother. The man then places her into a medicinal bath, leaving her feeling completely rejuvenated. The 2 Tormekian brothers then play some music, as Nausicaa feels like she's been swept away into paradise. Unfortunately, she soon discovers that something is off about this place, discovering that the farmers are in fact Hydra. Mito's plane flies overhead without noticing her, but that's because this place is made to look invisible from the outside world. She eventually runs into the mysterious man once more, but she quickly finds out that it's actually a woman. She then instructs Nausicaa to open up her mouth, just like her mother would. Nausicaa sees through the man's subversions, and although he saved her, she has no intentions of becoming his servant. Now it turns out that a boy, very much like Nausicaa, arrived in this garden 200 years ago. This boy would eventually escape the garden and go on to become the first Holy Emperor, and Namulith and Mirlupa were his children. When Namulith was young, he believed himself to be a messiah, genuinely concerned about the people's well-being, but over time, he grew to resent them. Humans inevitably tread the same paths over and over again, committing the same mistakes. Everyone believes that they will not err, yet they cannot escape the cycle in which karma gives birth to karma, sorrow gives birth to sorrow. Mito then notices the god warrior's mangled body, wondering what it intends to do. Selm comes to Nausicaa's side, informing her that this Hydra plans to use her uncertainty for his own ends. So yeah, the man right here, he's actually a Hydra. The Hydra says that many of Selm's people have visited this very garden, and they've all become wonderful gardeners. He also reminds Selm that they've sent many of their people to the place where the forest ends, but none of them have ever come back. It turns out that every one of them vomited up blood and died. So the humans that live now have grown accustomed to the exposure of miasma. And if Nausicaa had breathed the unpolluted air of the garden without the assistance of the Hydra, her lungs would have spewed blood. Nausicaa deduces that it wasn't tolerance that led to this change. Humans changed themselves of their own free will. Around the time of the 7 Days of Fire, humans used techniques to crystallize the contaminated matter to render it harmless. Thus, humans created a new ecosystem, the Sea of Corruption, with their own hands. Therefore, the Sea of Corruption was humanity's attempt at reviving the barren Earth in just a few thousand years. According to the original plan, they should be well along the path to rebirth, but in reality, foolishness has continued, and nihilism and despair have only spread. She will now head to the Crypts of Shua to discover the secrets of this very world. She will go there to unravel the truth. There is technology leaking from the crypt that has allowed men to manipulate life, to create Oma, the Mold, and Daikaisho. And wherever this path leads, Nausicaa has to see this through to the very end. Nausicaa takes her leave as the Hydra makes no attempts at stopping her. Nausicaa then meets up with Mito and the others, finding out that Oma walked off on his own. Nausicaa then realizes that she's walking the same path as the first Holy Emperor. And with this in mind, she may end up destroying humanity, but she's gonna follow this path nonetheless. While Nausicaa and the worm handlers approach Shua, we roll the clock back just a bit to set the stage. We see that the Toramikians are engaged in a bloody conflict to gain access to the Crypts of Shua. They make no progress whatsoever as Oma arrives on the scene. He then demands to see the king of the Toramikian Empire. Oma then goes on the offensive, leading to imagery that resembles the 7 Days of Fire. While everything burns in the vicinity, Oma instructs the king to gather his troops and return to his country at once. The king says that he wishes to talk to the people inside the crypt as Oma decides to help him out. But his help involves opening up the gates by force, and he's doing this by using his powerful light. An explosive affair takes place, as it looks like a nuclear bomb went off. The air fills with screams as Nausicaa hears Oma's voice calling out for her. Completely exhausting himself, Oma's body collapses into a gaping hole, and it looks like this is the end for him. A plane that attempted to escape the city then crashes near Nausicaa. Now the passengers are all dead, as she scolds the worm handlers for trying to steal their possessions. Ash from the city then rains down from the sky, as Nausicaa tells the men that they'll rest up for the time being. She then informs the worm handlers that the Sea of Corruption came into being to cleanse the world, and as long as humans don't destroy themselves, a bright new world will eventually welcome them with open arms. Of course, this is all a lie. The truth of the matter is that human beings transform themselves to survive in this polluted world. If the world is cleansed, their altered bodies will not be able to tolerate that purity. Now Nausicaa has rushed towards her goal, leaving behind many dead, and she's very close to discovering the secrets of the old world in the Crypts of Shua. And as long as the old technology exists in those crypts, it will attract wicked people who think nothing more of continuing the endless cycle of death. And so she needs to put an end to this. And after mourning the death of Oma, Nausicaa and the worm handlers make their final push towards the Crypts of Shua. Despite what has happened, the Toramikian king has survived, and plans to enter the now open crypt. Some men in robes exit the crypt, offering to escort the king in the lower regions. Elsewhere, Mito is not long for this world, as he encourages Aspel to go into the crypt and to return alive. Aspel makes his way inside, noticing decrepit bodies all over the place. They're alive, but they look very sickly. He then finds a Hydra incubator where they throw in the dead bodies. Nausicaa makes her way even further down as a voice calls out for his mother. She then meets with the Toramikian king as they discover the ancient writing system of the old world. The religious order of Doroks have dedicated their entire lives to deciphering these texts, and despite their considerable efforts, they still have much work to accomplish. The giant orb begins to glow as the monks state that the new king will be chosen. A glowing group of people begin to speak to the king and Nausicaa. Now the crypt was built to gather all human wisdom, so that it might help in rebuilding the world. To accomplish this, they need their light, but Nausicaa declines, saying they are nothing more than shadows. She accurately determines that they were the same men and women who created the Sea of Corruption, and they did this in order to slowly destroy the world. They have deceived the inhabitants of the world for centuries, because no matter how much knowledge and technology they have, they always need slaves to do their bidding. Now to live is to accept change, but they cannot change since they have denied death. A representative says that this is the only hope for the new world, and they even possess the technology to restore their bodies so that they may live in the newly purified world. Nausicaa scolds them, saying that they are the ugliest creatures alive, despite the fact that they were created to be artificial gods of purity. The representative asserts that Nausicaa is a nihilist, yet she counters this by saying that life is the light that shines through the darkness. All things are born from darkness, and all things return to darkness. And now it's time for you to return to the darkness, says Nausicaa. The godlike being shines its brilliant light, as Selm urges Nausicaa to call upon Oma. She desperately calls for Oma as the gigantic beast begins to stir. The godlike being urges Nausicaa to stop, claiming that history will repeat itself once more. Oma fires a blast, as it desperately crawls through the crypts to find Nausicaa. The being inside starts crying, saying that the eggs are dying. Now, these are the eggs that would have replaced the current humans as the world was purified. Oma bursts into the room and starts squeezing down upon the structure. And after enough force is applied, it bursts into liquid. I like you, girl. You're a chaos of destruction and mercy. I wish I had met you a long time ago, says the Toramikian king. Now the crypts are collapsing onto themselves, as Oma wonders if he's become a good person. Nausicaa reassures him that he's a brave warrior who is pure of heart. Kushana and the others watch the crypts collapse from the outside, as a small light emerges from the wreckage. It's Nausicaa, and everyone is beyond thrilled to see that she's alright. Taruka notices that her clothes are even bluer than the blood of the Ohm, and the scorched earth glows gold in the lights of the setting sun. Now the crypt's light has drained away the king's life force, and although he never liked Kushana, he's gonna relinquish his throne to her. However, Kushana will not become the new king. She will instead pave the path of justice for a different king. Nausicaa then meets up with Mito, as she thinks about how the blood of the crypt and the blood of the Ohm are exactly the same. Selm tells Nausicaa that they should keep this a little secret, and to entrust everything to the planet from now on. Yes, we must live. There is much that remains untold, but let us end our story here. Nausicaa remained in the Dorok Lands and lived with the Dorok people. One chronicle records that Nausicaa did not return to the Valley of the Wind until Chikuku had come of age, but another legend holds that she eventually left to join the Man of the Forest. History remembers Kushana as the restorer of Toramikia, yet she remained king regent to the end of her days, steadfastly refusing to assume the throne. Ever since that time, Toramikia has remained a country without a king. And with that, guys, that ends our story of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Now, the story itself and the themes are quite a bit different from the movie. And now, of course, the movie only covered about 20% of the manga, so it's going to be quite a bit different. But I think it's really interesting at the end because you can see a lot of Nietzschean and Jungian themes in there. You know, Carl Jung was really big on accepting both the light and the darkness, going deep within your soul and encountering the shadow, and not only encountering it, but embracing it. And you can see that these false gods refused the darkness. They wanted nothing to do with it, so they called Nausicaa a god of darkness. Nausicaa, being a benevolent person and not wanting to hurt anyone, understood that there were necessary sacrifices. It didn't make her happy, but at the same time, she understood that there's both good and evil, and you have to accept both if you're to accomplish anything. I could probably go at length about this, and maybe I'll make a full analysis video in the future, but I think for now, guys, I'll leave it there. This was a really fun video to make. I've been wanting to make this one for a while now, so it's finally good to get it off my checklist. But thanks again for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you later.